I'm Joanna Reeves, and I'm chair and founder of Conservative Friends of Neurodiversity. And I'm here with David Moore, who is my Friends of Neurodiversity colleague, and Tom Hunt MP, who is our parliamentary president, a big supporter of Friends of Neurodiversity. And you yourself, of course, are dyspraxic and dyslexic.
Yes, yeah.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about how your journey essentially, and how it was discovered that you have neurodiversities diagnosed?
I struggled at school. It was pretty clear, I was very much a slow starter at school. I think I was around 12, I had a writing age of an 8-year-old. So I was a long way behind. And that was, couldn't do my shoelaces until I was 14.
Right.
I think it was when I was about 12, though, I dropped so far behind when it came to like reading and writing that it was kind of make or break for me at the school I was at. And fortunately, that was when I got diagnosed when I was 12 with dyslexia and dyspraxia. And from that point onwards, I got much better support package and I was able to catch up and then end up eventually being quite academically successful.
So was there someone who said, we should get this kid tested, or how did that come about? Why was it suddenly at 12 that?
I think it was. I think when you're younger, sometimes people, development, etc. It's not always the case that something's linked to you having neurodiversity. So I think it was probably the extent to which I'd fallen behind, and the fact that it'd been over quite a long period of time that they thought. They thought, there's a good special needs coordinator at the school that I was at, and I think they probably saw some characteristics in me and thought, right, we think he's probably got these things. Let's have a look. And then it was quite clear that I had that, and then over time I've been able to develop coping mechanisms, and I've been lucky with the support I've had. And I actually think that once you sort of know what you've got, if you get the support you need, I think it can be advantageous being neurodiverse.
Right. Yes. Well, we talk a lot, don't we, David, about the challenges, but the joys that come with neurodiversity. So, what are yours? What are your joys? What are your advantages?
I think in some respects, I think being dyslexic and dyspraxic, you have a very good long-term memory. I think you tend to be creative as a thinker. I think your brain's wired a bit differently, so you can often see things differently. I think we're quite good at getting up and over issues, seeing connections between different things, often thinking strategically.
Yeah.
So I think those things are good things. I think the challenges, particularly with dyspraxia, are organisational.
Yes.
I'm not the most organised individual. I'm not very good with steps and sequences. I struggle with many physical tasks. So I and sort of day-to-day life admin, not something I'm particularly good at.
Okay, things like losing your key or something.
Yeah, and just like and having sort of being organised with like life admin, like having like files for this, files for that, it all seems to be.
That sounds familiar to David.
Yeah. One dyslexic to another. How do you feel? Is it when people almost a bit judgmental at times in society? They assume that a cluttered desk and perhaps a disorganised file is a sign of incompetence, when in fact, in many ways, that's a superpower because it means you can hyper focus on some issues, and in other ways, it means you're thinking and processing many things.
Quite, and I think. I think there's been various occasions, in my life, particularly when I was at school before I got the support I needed, actually, and even sometimes after that, where sometimes you were made to feel thick, or that you weren't capable, or even that you were being lazy, and it's ever so frustrating when you feel like you're being got at, for being lazy, or when actually you're not. You just your brain's wired a bit differently, and you process information a bit differently, and I think that we're not where we need to be as a society on neurodiversity. I think that we in some respects, we've got better. We have got better. I think my dad, for example, has what I've got, and he never had any assessment. He never had any. He probably hadn't even heard of dyspraxia until I told him about it. So I think we have to probably acknowledge some of the slight improvements there's been, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, that's so true. We actually did. In fact, our very first podcast in this series was with a friend of mine called Tony McGurk, who discovered he himself was dyslexic when he took his children to go and get their diagnosis, or at least be investigated for this. And that's what we talked about with him on the podcast, how that was as an adult. Was it when you got your diagnosis and you started getting the help? I mean, was that just a huge relief?
I
to the
mean,
young Tom?
I think not everything is crystal clear in terms of. But I remember key thing for me probably was I think it was clear for most of my time at school before that point that I was a long way behind. I think I probably tried to just ignore it and not really face up to it in a way that I ought to have done. I was very interested in sport and things like that. And
but why should you face up to it? You were a child, so it wasn't for you.
Well, I perhaps thought I could sort of get away with it and do something else and go into sports. But I remember though when I was sort of 12, 8, I think it was looking like I was probably going to have to be taken out of that school. And I think that's probably what jolted me into really applying myself to trying to catch up.
Yeah, well, you obviously did an amazing job. So what about, obviously, being an MP? How do you find it kind of informs your work as an MP?
Well, I mean, honestly, when I was elected as a member of Parliament, I didn't think when I got elected that it would necessarily be something I'd major on. I didn't really think about it all that much. But I remember when I did my maiden speech, it kind of just came out, because I think the thing about a maiden speech is that you talk about your constituency, talk about some of the things you want to do practically in terms of politics, policy, but you also are ideally we're talking a little bit about your own life story and your own motivations and for what has motivated you to become a member of Parliament. And that probably forced me to think and ask myself searching questions. And then it sort of came out in my maiden speech in a way perhaps I wasn't expecting.
Right.
And then after that, I got onto the Education Select Committee. I was on that for a couple of years, and I was very active on these issues on the committee. I'm no longer on the Education Select Committee, but I am still Vice President of the British Lecturer Association, and just in the process at the moment of setting up a new all-party parliamentary group for Neurodiversity in Defence, because I've spent a year in the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme, and I've developed views on that.
Absolutely. And I'd love to ask you, if possible, about the current situation with neurodiversity in the armed forces. So, for example, if you want to join, for example, I'm in the process of joining the reserves as an officer, is if you have, for example, ADHD, if you're on ADHD medication, that's often struck off. It's very rare you get a case-by-case consideration. In the American armed forces, they do it case-by-case for those with ASD spectrum disorders. But it seems like for the British Armed Forces, it's a lot harder. The barrier to entry to enter with neurodiversity is a lot harder, despite the fact you find if you speak to many officers, even an admiral came out recently, was diagnosed recently with autism.
Oh, wow.
ADHD is in many ways an advantage in commanding men and women into battle. What would you say is the push for that? Because MPs have written in, they've said to the Minister of the Armed Forces, how are they going to change this? What's the kind of roadmap there?
Well, again, it was when I started the Armed Force Parliamentary Scheme, I didn't necessarily think that there'd be an angle like a neurodiversity angle to defence. When I started the scheme, I didn't really. But again, when I think about my own, I think I once thought about joining the Royal Navy Reserves and went to one of the training sessions. And something I really, really struggle with is if you get in a small group, if you get in a group of 8 or 9 people, and you have to learn a new physical task as a group. That's when I'm sort of at my worst, and I'll be the one out of the 8 or 9 who's the slowest. But I'm remembering new steps and sequences, things like that. So, if, for example, because my brain just works a bit differently. So I sort of went to that taster session and thought, I just don't think this is for me. So I just disengaged from it. I joined the Armed Forces Parliamentary Scheme and had some really interesting conversations on the scheme. I remember having a very interesting conversation with this commanding officer at Sandhurst about this, about what might be done, because obviously the soldier first principle that runs across the armed forces, and there's some reasons why that is the case, and the benefits of why that is the case. But it can present challenges for individuals who may have a lot to offer, a lot of talents to bring, but struggle with certain things and are therefore alienated from it or pushed away. And I think certainly with cyber increasing in terms of its importance, I think the need for our national security to have individuals who see things differently and perhaps see things that other people don't, neurodiverse thinkers, is growing. So I think that it is a challenge that has to be grappled with. I know it's not straightforward. I certainly wouldn't want anything to be done that undermines the quality of the armed forces. And frankly, if when it comes to fighting and etc., you can't cut corners. But I do think there is a way, though, that we can, have a discussion about how we can better utilise the talents of neurodiverse individuals in the defence. So that is what you know. And I've met lots of. I mean, I've also met individuals who are senior in the armed forces who I'm certain who are neurodiverse,
yes.
and I've you know, and I've heard different things about, you know, one branch being better than the other, being more accommodating than the other. So hopefully, you know, this all-party parliamentary group will enable us to look at some solutions and some answers. But it's interesting what you said about the US forces. I wasn't aware of that. But that's something we could look into.
Absolutely.
What message would you give to someone who knows they're neurodiverse, is interested in becoming an MP, or pursuing some sort of parliamentary career? What message would you give them? What advice?
My advice to them would be to do it, because I think we need more voices in Parliament. We need more people, more MPs in Parliament who can campaign on these sorts of issues. And also, in some respects, it's a very good job to have if you're neurodiverse, because you get a team of people who can support you, and who often can complement you, and then often good at the things that you're not so good at. So in some respects, actually, it's the ideal job to have, because you get, you know, you can really focus on the things that you're good at and the things you're passionate about, and you've got a team of people who can support you doing that. So, you know, I mean, so I certainly, if you're neurodiverse and you think about being a member of Parliament, I definitely encourage you not to think that it's something you can't do. It's definitely something you can do. The support's there in place to ensure you can. And, you know, I think we need more neurodiverse thinkers. I think we need more people speaking in Parliament about it. And, you know, I'd always encourage it.
And how do you think, or how do you hope, certainly as our parliamentary president, how do you hope that Conservative Friends of Neurodiversity can help? What message do you have for us?
Well, I think that there's, you know, as much as I think that there are challenges in, you know, being a candidate, and then I think that, you know, the Conservative Friends of Neurodiversity, I applaud, you know, the ambition to get more, you know, candidates and MPs who are neurodiverse, and providing them that support through a process. And, you know, and I think that we need to spread the message within the Conservative Party about being neurodiverse, you know, because, you know, not all Conservative associations are necessarily that averse of the nuances of being neurodiverse.
Yes.
So I think it's important that we educate in that respect, and talk about the advantages. And look, special educational needs is a massive issue facing our country. The desire to get special educational needs right is a massive, massive issue.
Yeah.
And I think the Conservative Party needs to have, you know, a lot of people who can contribute towards that debate. It needs to have a lot of people with lived experience and a lot of people who can be powerful advocates on this issue. You know, we can't allow one party to have, you know, to sort of dominate that space. We've got to have a powerful voice on it. And I think in some respects, you know, the Conservative Party is the ideal sort of party to do that, because, you know, I like to think the Conservative Party is a party of individuality and, you know, and you know, the whole thing about neurodiverse is that they're very individual. So I certainly, I don't feel like there's any contradiction between being a Conservative and being neurodiverse.
No, not at all. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more people that can be talking about it, it makes such a difference to the outcome of each individual to get it right. So the more of us there are talking about it, trying to get things right for individuals, the better. Well, look, thanks ever so much, Tom. It's been brilliant talking to you. And
my pleasure.
Thank you, Tom.
I really appreciate your support.